I never thought that it would turn out that way, and I can remember, the last time that I was in jail, I had been there for 6 months, and I was certain I was going to prison, and, um, I just remember thinking, like, all I wanted was to be the kind of mom that I didn't have, and I had turned out to be exactly who my mom was, and, I thought that my opportunity for recovery or any sort of life was over.
Let's explore what it would take for Annette's life to change direction.
Yes, and Annette's a wonderful person with tremendous potential. What it takes for Annette to change is one, we have to help her unlearn to learn. Two, we have to adjust her thinking errors about whether she can be a good mom and person in society. And three, we have to help her practice mental and physical skills in her lived environment at home, work, and play to develop and foster resiliency.
There are times in life when a discovery changes how we do things. Hi, I'm Shelley Schoenfeld. Join me and my podcast partner, behavioral technologist Bob Gold, from whom you've just heard, on this journey of discovery as we unfold a whole person brain health delivery science for people in need. Welcome to Human Resilience, changing the way healthcare is delivered. This episode discusses a new paradigm in substance use treatment and recovery programs. Annette is in recovery at Rimrock Foundation in Montana and is joined by Dr. Sue Zbikowski, a behavioral psychologist based outside of Seattle.
I think I took my first drink when I was around 13 or 14 years old, which was quickly followed by trying some pot. And, I didn't realize how maybe bad things were until I felt so good. And from there, I just was seeking that out as much as I possibly could. That's kind of hard when you're that young. But by the time I got to high school, I was really just willing to try what was put in front of me. And I did. And that led to harder drugs. And, I never really had any consequences for that other than the worthless feeling that you have inside when you kind of sober up from that stuff. And I ended up getting pregnant at a really young age and kind of come from a broken home with a mother who was a heroin addict. And I remember the day that my daughter was born, I thought, I don't want this life for her. I don't want her to have the childhood that I had. And I was determined to not drink or use drugs again. I didn't realize that I had a disease at the time. I just thought it was a matter of willpower and choice.
One thing that comes to mind very quickly is that in the Rimrock program, the Recovery Pathway program, there was the opportunity for participants in the program to indicate that they wanted to reach a peer specialist. And through a two-way communication where there was a check-in at the end of the day of how it's going, and the indication could then escalate.
When I was released from jail and I got into treatment court, I didn't have any sober supports. My family, they really didn't want to talk to me. They had heard that song and dance of promised recovery before, and I didn't know anybody who was trying to get sober or who had gotten sober. And so, when I was signed up with the GOMO program, they have these little stories you can click on, and I got to watch the peer specialists at the treatment court offer their stories. Because, you meet people, they tell you what peer support is, they introduce you to your counselor, but it's like, you don't really know who these people are. And it's like, it just seems like another person that the courts put in front of you. And so it was when when I'm home with myself on the weekends and left to my own thoughts, you know what I mean? I felt so alone. I'd reach out to people that, were still using. And so when I had the option to be able to text somebody at 9 o'clock at night and have somebody reach back out to me, it got me through the night. Like, okay, this is what's going on. I feel like I want to get high. I don't know what to do. And they would instantly say, can you call? And, okay, I'm willing to call you, and talk to me and talk me through that craving and tell me where to get to a meeting the next day or what I can do in the meantime. And I didn't believe in that kind of stuff. I didn't really think it worked like that, but it did. And before I knew it, I was 1 week sober, 2 weeks sober, a month sober, 2 months sober. And I think the other thing too is eventually I started to get my kids back in my life, and parenting after you haven't parented in a while is really hard and really stressful. And so I was able to sign up for a parenting track that gave me tips on parenting. And then I started using peer support for like, I would text or let them know like, oh my god, I don't know what to do, the kids are driving me crazy. And so I'd get tips on not just how to stay sober but also how to be a sober mom, and like, why don't you get out of the house and take them to the park. And it's like, oh yeah, we don't have to just sit here and yell at each other, we can get out of the house and go to the park. And it's like, that stuff seems like a no-brainer to me now, but then it's like I didn't think of it.
I was unable to help my sister who was addicted to tobacco. She started at a young age. She was 16. She ended up, because of smoking 2 packs of cigarettes a day, developing emphysema and COPD, and it killed her at the age of 57. So she was very, very young. And she was so addicted that even after having to be intubated and on a machine to help her breathe, that when they finally were able to take her off, she went back to smoking. And you would think the fear of having to be in a hospital bed and having a machine breathe for you because you can't breathe on your own would be enough to help someone overcome it. So it shows you that, in this case, how addictive a substance can be, that a life-threatening event is not enough. And so when people think that it's education and just having, people know that they want to overcome their addiction, but it doesn't necessarily mean they can. And it's because, when I mean they can, meaning like just will it to happen, it requires understanding what are those root causes.
Bob, talk to me about how you would measure a program like this versus traditional programs.
You just heard from Annette and Sue how difficult it is to change a behavior. So the outcomes that we measure, the one I'm really proud of is 50% of the people in the program we got back to full-time employment, which means we changed their outlook and perspective and their feeling of self-trust and confidence and self-worth. So by changing their outlook, we've also had a 90% graduation rate, 0 rearrests, very few relapses, a 6 times increase in their feelings of being psychologically safe, and a sense of belonging, and a 5 times increase in their ability to engage with their family and their children, as you heard Annette say, was very difficult.
Those are some really fantastic outcomes. What was the sample size?
The program, it's hundreds and hundreds of folks. So there's 2 aspects. It's used in traditional treatment and recovery in outpatient, intensive outpatient. It's also used as an integral part of the Montana drug treatment court system. I recently spoke with Coralie Schmitz, Chief Operations Officer of the Rimrock Foundation in Billings, Montana. Coralie runs both the traditional outpatient program as well as the Montana Drug Court Treatment Program. And she's going to give us some insights in how this program is changing the way how healthcare is delivered in drug court treatment in Montana.
What GOMO allowed us to do was to connect with the clients outside of a traditional setting. So evenings, weekends, they could connect really quickly with a peer support. They could also connect with their counselors, but we found that the peer support being on call was quicker, a little more receptive. The counselors were always in the loop about the things that they said because the chats, any chats that they had were stored online. And so the counselors could review those the next day, see anything that had occurred. Treatment courts are specialty courts, or they're called problem-solving courts now, where somebody who incurs an offense can be referred to this team, a treatment team, to reduce the charges or perhaps do an alternative path to satisfying legal charges. So that versus jail, they can go to treatment courts. And the team is made up of prosecutor, defense attorney, probation officer, judge, someone from treatment, and then anybody specialized. So a veterans treatment court would have a veteran representative, a family treatment court would have a DFS representative, things like that. And so the team is based on the needs that that court is serving. Clients are typically referred by their attorney, and then prosecutors must agree and the judge must agree, and then they're screened through treatment to make sure that they qualify for the services that are going to be provided. Once they come into our treatment courts, we sign them up. That's day one, the case manager that meets with them to sign all of their paperwork immediately signs them up through GOMO and gets their track set up. So if they're family, if they're mental health, if they're substance use, what track are they going to be on, explains to them how to use things, shows them on their first, they get a welcome message from GOMO right away, and shows them how to use the process. And so how GOMO has helped with that court is to be able to connect further with objective data that the judges can see, that's not just the counselor reporting out, these clients are doing really well. It's objective data where the client says, I am doing really well. I'm rating myself a 4 today because today was a really good day.
You know, Bob, I always say that life is just a collection of mini moments, and responding to them is really what shapes our lives. Let's talk a little bit about the special sauce that best impacts and shapes those moments.
Yeah, thanks, Shelley. I love the mini moments. So, the special sauce in Gomo is we personalize the program for every individual using our cognitive and behavioral machine learning techniques. One of them is called MILD, micro learning and doing. Based on people's responses, answers, action, it adjusts the content, the messaging, the activities, and the questions to everyone to help get them through what they need to do to build a schedule, a routine, feel better about themselves that fosters a change in outlook and begins to change the brain positively instead of ruminating, and that's called neuroplasticity. So they ruminate less and they're focused on their future going forward.
Bob, a unique power we have as individuals is the ability to influence our outcomes and influence our daily lives. Can you talk about some specific techniques that we can use to exercise our brains and our bodies to foster this human resiliency?
Absolutely. There's three things. One is we use music that we scientifically curate the tones, tunes, decibels to help people with various conditions. It could be to reduce stress, motivate an action, get them to relax, get them to feel better about themselves. We have affirmations, meditations. A second is using other creative arts techniques like art therapy, cooking, exercise that use multiple senses to get them out of their current mind and body state. And the third technique that's interesting is we record and use a lot of peer stories. People love to hear from people like themselves what they've done to be successful. And everything's personalized based on who you are. So for Annette, it would be a peer story about parenting or how to get out of being an adolescent drug user from another person that she can relate to. So those are some things, Shelley, that we use that are very effective.
And giving people the ability to choose those methods allows them to pick their own path and exercise that power of influence over their own outcome, which is just tremendous.
Yeah, so our machine learning works in two ways. It allows them to pick pathways based on what they believe, and it also, from our learnings, from the responses or lack thereof, it automatically gives them things that we believe will be helpful for them to get them into a better state of mind.
And then we can also collect that data, which is interesting, right? And give them more either when they're asking for it or in the moments that we know they're needing it to maximize those opportunities to really churn situations into positive ones to get their outlook on track.
Absolutely. Gomo discovered things that in the last 50 years haven't been discovered in treating people with addictive behaviors and whatnot. One of the things we learned is adults who in the program who have children like from about 5 years old through adolescence had much more relapse and trouble getting back productive because they felt so stigmatized about what they did to their children. So that's why you heard Annette, we added a parenting track. We helped them through it. That discovery of data hasn't been done because prior, you're not with people in their day to day life, so you wouldn't necessarily discover that little fact.
Thanks, Bob. Obviously, a strong circle of support when you're going through your recovery journey is important. And we spoke with Charlie Curie, who was appointed by President George W. Bush to head up the Substance Use and Mental Health Services Administration, for his thoughts on that.
Well, we've learned through the years that for people to sustain their recovery, connectedness is very important, especially connectedness with people who understand what you've been through. They've been through it themselves. But how do you facilitate that day to day when people have their lives, they're separated physically? A tool like Gomo brings people together virtually. They can bring people together in a community fashion, one on one, and break down that isolation. Isolation is a risk factor that perpetuates relapse. And isolation, talking beyond substance use, it's very important to address that there, but behavioral health and mental health in general. The Surgeon General just issued a report which indicated that isolation was very much a part of what was occurring in people's lives who began to encounter a mental health crisis, began to have substance use relapse. People go to a treatment program, and we saw this for years, residential treatment program. Then they're back in the environment they were in after the residential program with maybe minimal supports, minimal connectedness. Relapse is more likely to occur because the person's back in the environment they were in. Part of it is transparency in relationships help promote recovery and build resilience in people's lives. The other aspect of Gomo, a tool like Gomo empowers peers, peer specialists, and we're seeing that arena grow so much in behavioral health. Actually, peer specialists, I would say the substance use field, if you look at AA, they were the original peer support. And I've often said that peer support and the concept of recovery was a gift of the substance use field to the mental health field.
Yeah. Technology is where our field is going, and AI is where our field is going. And being able to be on the front end of setting up a program that has multiple levels and multiple paths that really individualizes the programs for the clients has been a game changer, and it's been a surprise for the clients to see how much they actually enjoyed it. We also incorporated a family track, so we have family involvement here, and then family members can sign up. That took a second to kick off the ground because the clients were concerned that families were getting information about them, but then they realized it's really just a support for that family member. So that has helped broaden our reach and our ability to connect with people outside of the identified person that's receiving services. And so really from an administrative perspective, the biggest benefit that I see is data collection, because we are a data-driven world and a data-driven business, and the funding comes from based on what you can show that your outcomes are. And so from a COO administrative perspective, the data is the most important piece that I glean from this. However, our clients feel differently. Our clients feel like it's the connection. They don't care about the data. They just want to make sure that they're getting their text explaining what to do on Saturday morning with their kids. Little things like that they find personal and they can relate to. I think that's what the clients would say is the most important piece.
In early recovery, like thoughts and feelings are fleeting. And so I may feel like on top of the world at 8 o'clock in the morning, but by 4 or 5 in the afternoon, I don't feel like I'm worth much. Again, I'm starting to fall into a depressive state, and it really is a roller coaster like that. And so Gomo gave me the opportunity to reach out and say, like, I don't know what happened, but I'm feeling anxious again. I'm feeling like I don't know if I want to be in the treatment court program anymore. There were a lot of messages that were like that. And normally I wouldn't say things like that to my counselor, right? Because I don't know if I'm going to get in trouble or whatnot, but I was able to be completely honest with how I was feeling. And then it sort of puts a buffer there of having to say that stuff out loud. And so the next day when I come in, or I come in for my individual, she would say things like, "What's going on with this? Why do you feel like you don't want to do treatment court? What happened? I saw you at 9, on Wednesday morning, and then at 7, you seemed fine at 9 on Wednesday, but then at 7 in the evening, you reported that you rated yourself a 1 or a 2 on the how are you doing? What happened between there?" And it's like, left to me and my own devices, I don't know what happened, but that gave her the opportunity to be like, well, let's backtrack through your day. Okay, you had this come up and this come up and then this, and now it taught me how to kind of do this spot check inventory throughout the day and figure out, why do I go from a 10 to a 1 in a matter of hours. And so, yeah, it was super helpful.
One of the concerns is, will people show up to treatment? And so showing up for your next session, or showing up for court if you're in a court mandated program, because that is part of what's required. And so getting that message when you might just be thinking, oh, I'm tired today, I feel unmotivated, and you get that message in the morning or at night, depending upon the timing, it could be enough to remind the person, I'm committed. I'm committed to my recovery. I'm committed to my mental health. I'm going to show up. And so that's something that, yes, could a professional call everybody and remind them, we care about you, we want it, but to have it built into a program where it's automated and thoughtful and framed positively can feel very non-intrusive, but motivational, and not feel like just a robocall in terms of, I'm just getting a reminder, this is your doctor calling, you should show up tomorrow. It's very different. It feels like that message of your recovery is important, your mental health is important. These are some steps you can take, including going back to your care. People who are suffering from addiction can worry that they have ruined things. And can I, again, fix my relationships? Can I repair my work relationships, go back to work, or even start a new career, or whatever it might be? And so there's that worry, right, of how, because of what happened, is everything else broken? And so allowing people to have hope in their life, and maybe, again, they're going to create a new life. It may not be going back to the life they had before, because maybe that was toxic.
I eventually got to graduate the treatment court program. I opted to stay in Gomo Health after, just because it felt like a safety net for me. And I knew that I'd be able to get a hold of my treatment team should something happen. You're sort of wrapped with care and coddled a little while you're in that program. And when you're done, you're done. And there's, a time for that, but it's kind of scary for a treatment court participant when that happens. And so, but since that time, I'm happy to report all of my children live with me again. I'm a full-time mom to them. I actually got to come back and work for the treatment that I went through, and I get to supervise and oversee our peer support department now. And so my life's kind of come full circle. It was a painful and long road to recovery, but I've made it through and continue to walk through it every day.
Thanks so much, Dr. Sue, Coralie, Charlie, and our special guest, Annette. On behalf of Bob Gold and myself, thank you all for listening to this episode of Human Resilience, Changing the Way Healthcare is Delivered.